Elton John using the drum now. Daniel. Let's see whether it sounds better. Daniel is traveling tonight in a plane. I can see the red tail light and a fast pen. And I can see Daniel waving goodbye. God looks like Daniel. Must be the clouds in my eye. They say Spain is pretty, though I never been. Daniel says it's the best place he's ever seen. And I know he's been there long enough. Lord, I miss Daniel. I miss him so much. Daniel, my brother, you are older than me. Do you still feel the pain of the scars I don't hear? Daniel, you're blind, but you see more than I. Daniel, you are a star in the face of the sky. Daniel is traveling tonight in a plane. I can see the red tail light headed for Spain. And I can see Daniel waving goodbye. God, it looks like Daniel. Must be the clouds in my eye. Must be the clouds in my eye. Daniel by Elton John. A good song to start our discussion. Today I'm going to go into philosophy a little bit because we played a bit of music. Now I'm going to go into a bit of our discussion because the program Mazungumzo especially is for serious discussion, because a kind of lecture at a doctorate level on leadership, and I have something on Google class is growing slowly, and I'm looking for students who can register, and we can rapport, we can learn things, and we can discuss serious ideas, analysis at a higher level of a doctorate stage or master's. But these things pile up slowly, Kaizen, bit by bit, the way stalagmites form, it's a slow process. That's how knowledge comes in. Now, in this episode, I'm just going to touch on Wilhelm Orman von Quine. He was a great scholar. I think he passed on in 1976. I remain to be corrected. He was a giant when it comes to philosophy and mathematics and all these kind of things. He's like James Whitehead and William James, and Charles Sanders Peirce. And he's also in a realm of people like Dewey, those people who have read people like Odera, people like Outlaw, and many, many people who have tried philosophy. Is a couple of names. I cannot name everybody. But in the postmodernity, you have people like Jacques Derrida, and then you have somebody like Richard Rorty, you have David Davidson, you have Putman, You have people like I mentioned Jacques Derrida, Gilles Bourriade, and also Monad, Jean Monad. The world happened by chance. I think he's a laureate. So what I'm going to discuss here is to bring in the topic of people like the Vienna Circle, people like Ludwig Wittgenstein. This kind of names, and Hegel, Friedrich Hegel and Immanuel Kant. But mainly I'm going to go to people who actually formed the Vienna Circle, like Rudolf Carnap. Because basically these were mathematicians, but they developed an interest in philosophy. And as people know, there is always the problem of others. And there is many people, they don't just study a subject and just maintain it for bettering the lives of human beings. They take it a stage further. They want to prove this race is more knowledgeable and is able to acquire better knowledge than this other group. They will always go into that politics. The bell curve. You remember Hofstede and Murray? They wrote a book about bell curve, trying to show that people from Africa they have less ability of acquiring knowledge. They're less, actually going to the point of eugenics, of saying they're less than human. And that is completely untrue. And when it comes to places like Egypt, which is in Africa, people always try to say, oh, those are not Africans, but it is in Africa. It was not done by Africans, not out of Africa, And arguments that these things were done by aliens. The pyramids in Giza, which is in Sudan, were built by aliens. While you can see the owners are still there. They're black. They speak Arabic, but they're Africans, even Egyptians. If you read Nasser's book, the son of late Kwame Nkrumah, he wrote a piece on who forms the society of Egypt. And he was able to show that these are African tribes. They speak Arabic as I speak English, but I speak Kikuyu, I speak Luo, and I speak Kamba. Same thing with the Egyptians. There are some who are light-skinned, but like Bedouins, Moors, and all these kind of people, Tuaregs, they speak African dialects. And if you go to Egypt, you stay there for a while, you will find out what I'm saying is true, that these people have their own language. They have different languages in Egypt, but they speak Arabic as an official language. Because people think Arabic is a group of people. No, it's a language. So you can find Sudanese. They speak their own languages, but they also use Arabic to read the Quran and conduct in the mosques, they conduct the prayers and everything in Arabic. Now, the Vienna group, why I have a lot of interest on it, is because they brought mathematics into philosophy. And when mathematics was brought into philosophy, it was brought basically, because you see, when you have a language and then you are conducting like research, sometimes in order to be brief, hieroglyphics are like what formulas are in mathematics. They are symbols and signs. So the mathematicians have come up with a kind of a summary language. So when you are writing statistics or you are solving a maths problem which is abstract, you kind of put it in symbols instead of long language. It becomes easier and brief if you use symbols and signs in mathematics, like formulas. And this is now, the thing I'm bringing this thing in is not because they did not do a good work, but you see the mathematicians who formed the group of philosophers, they started to kind of perpetuate the idea that the indigenous people, especially from the colonized countries where the Westerners went to, did not have mathematical skills. Now, those people who know Dongons from Senegal, they are great astrologers, and they have been actually commended for being the navigators who helped people like Christopher Columbus reach South America and go as far as India. They are great. They were great scholars. Now, if that is the case, and the Hawaiians, the Hokulea, the navigators, the traditional navigators, excuse me, these were also great mathematicians because they could actually use their skills to locate the heavenly bodies for them to be able to direct or sail the ships from, let's say, Hawaii to Tahiti or Rarotonga. Now, that proves that indigenous people had also very high mathematical skills. But you find that when these groups start to come in, they start to perpetuate the idea of others for the fact that they were actually philosophizing using mathematics, using formulas. Like when Walheim Orman Quine wrote the book Word and Objects, he praises the idea of language being very, very important in the perpetuation of knowledge. But at the same time, when he started to use the word gavagai, it's just a word he tried to, I think it's kind of a ridicule to me. When I looked at it deeply and started to kind of look at it, what he meant by the word gavagai, I realized that actually he was using the word gavagai as if it was a ridicule of the indigenous people, whoever he was referring to. I don't know whether he was referring to the Aborigines, he was referring to a tribe in Africa. A gavagai that he used that word, it's become so famous, but it means a rabbit. And he goes to explain interpretation and translation. For example, the people who came to Africa and wrote the Bible and wrote in indigenous languages. He kind of goes into that and to how informants, will kind of have problems in translating their language into English into their vernacular, into their languages. So I don't say Quine is he does anything wrong, but if you read the book itself, Words and Objects, you will see that he is in a very subtle way trying to look down on the indigenous people. Because in Words and Objects, he's saying how words as social tools help define objects. But if you go in the inside, he starts using probability theories or probability of the calculus. And he uses the if formulas to formulate maxims and axioms and matrices. And he goes into the details of mathematics, and he deviates from really using words in defining what he's saying. So you will find that most of the ridicule that the West does to other people and kind of think they're inferior to them, they use that they are so good in mathematics. And in other records of other people, they don't find people who have defined things using statistics, using formulas, let's say for like Newton, Einstein. So this one kind of allows them to elevate themselves and considers others inferior. So these are things, as we think about Black Lives Matter, it is good to kind of bring out the fact that there have been other indigenous people who have actually explored mathematics, especially people in North Africa, like the Carthaginians, who are Moors and Berbers and Tuaregs. They did lots of studies in areas of mathematics, physics and chemistry, biology and anthropology. They are there in history. There are so many discoveries that we use today in science, which actually the originators and the inventors of these things, they're actually indigenous people. So in this, just in going, because sometimes I like to touch things which actually perpetuate racism. These are areas that we need to kind of bring out these things. And that's why you see Jacques Derrida is the one who has hammered these people to put them in shape and ridicule them for having always to perpetuate the idea of others. Some people like let's say Roti. Roti also wrote intensely and heavily in his book in 1979, The Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature. He negates the idea of that the West is the keeper of truth, reality, objective reality. And he tells us language is the most important thing in human beings. And what is important is bettering the lives of human beings. It's not search for truth, it's bettering the lives of your community and your people. And that's all. And most of the things that people observe, experiment, they are all intended to benefit human beings. Some people, okay, they make things which harm human beings. But in most cases in a society, knowledge is what betters people's lives. It makes people actually better than yesterday. Like when you filter water and you make it pure, it doesn't have germs and it's good to drink. That's filtration. It betters people's lives because people don't get sick, children don't get sick, they drink clean water and bang. Purification of ocean water into clean drinking water. That's a positive thing. But the arguments that African had no mathematicians, and that is why we think they're inferior. And then people like Murray and Hampstead, they write bell curve, and they use eugenics as if it's the best method of breeding human beings. So you see, it's just kind of trying to decipher things and clarify things. So Orman Quine, Wilhelm van Orman Quine, though famous, and even Charles Pierce Sanders, William James, Dewey, Hegel, Immanuel Kant, Holden, Frege, they are, if you look at the way they write their mathematical formulas and philosophies of philosophers as it pertains to mathematics. At the end of the day, they try to elevate those people who have written and explored philosophy from a mathematical perspective as if they are the geniuses of the universe. But later, as we study, and might be science helps us to understand, like how did the Shaunas build the very, very archaeological sites you find in Zimbabwe and South Africa, the Mayas in South America, the Dongons in Senegal, and the Great Pyramids of Sudan, and the unique architecture of the Ethiopians, the ones who live in the mountains, and they archive the philosophers from Ethiopia, Aramaic. Then we are going to see that, and these things are brought into the open, might be using DNA and the sciences of the computers and the nanotechnology, help and might to decipher the hieroglyphics the Egyptians left us in a more deeper form. Until we meet again, this is your host, Dr. Gilbert Kisere, saying ciao ciao until we meet again.